in the morning.
Welcome back to our channel, where we bring you the most profound and gripping updates from Genoa City. Today is a beautiful day to delve into the intricate webs of love, betrayal, and unforeseen consequences that define our favorite characters. Let us unravel the latest emotional tempest brewing within the Newman and Abbott dynasties, a storm that threatens to shatter everything. Genoa City is a landscape historically defined by ruthless power struggles and corporate espionage, yet beneath the glittering facades of glass towers and polished boardroom tables lies the fragile, inescapable reality of human mortality. For weeks, the atmosphere has been choked with the toxic fumes of vengeance, primarily fueled by the relentless, high-stakes war over the control of Newman Enterprises. However, the true tragedy is currently unfolding far away from the financial spreadsheets and legal threats. It is a silent, agonizing crisis centered on the revered matriarch of the Newman family, a woman who has spent her entire life acting as the emotional shock absorber for her husband's ruthless ambitions. Nikki Newman is currently fighting a terrifying battle that no amount of wealth or corporate leverage can win. And her profound suffering is about to ignite a firestorm that will scorch the very foundations of two legacy families. The physical and psychological toll on Nikki has been building to a catastrophic, unbearable crescendo. For months, she has been plagued by excruciating, blinding migraines, symptoms she desperately and tragically tried to attribute to the familiar, albeit cruel, progression of her multiple sclerosis. She wore a masterful mask of stoicism, hiding the terrifying severity of her pain behind elegant smiles and unwavering, fiercely loyal support for her family. Yet, the dark shadows beneath her eyes and the sudden, frightening moments of physical disorientation painted a much darker picture. The hidden terror of a rapidly growing brain tumor has been silently ravaging her from within, compounding the neurological devastation of her pre-existing condition. Nikki has been carrying the crushing weight of this medical nightmare entirely on her own, terrified of adding to the chaotic burdens already weighing down her loved ones. While Nikki has been quietly fading into a state of severe medical peril, Victor Newman has been entirely consumed by his insatiable, blinding appetite for retribution. His absolute obsession with reclaiming his eponymous empire and utterly destroying Phyllis Summers has created a massive, impenetrable blind spot in his personal life. Victor has been operating in a state of hyper-focused aggression, orchestrating elaborate traps, manipulating artificial intelligence to forge evidence, and engaging in a high-stakes game of legal chess with Michael Baldwin. His days and nights have been monopolized by the intoxicating thrill of the corporate kill. In his relentless pursuit of absolute dominance, Victor has tragically neglected the sanctuary of his own home, failing to notice the desperate fragility of the woman he claims to love above all else. His priorities have been fatally skewed, completely blinded by the blinding glare of his own monumental ego. The inevitable breaking point arrived with devastating, terrifying suddenness. The fragile thread tethering Nikki to consciousness finally snapped under the unbearable, mounting pressure of her rapidly deteriorating health. The sudden and terrifying collapse was a visceral shock to the system, transforming a moment of quiet endurance into a frantic, life-or-death emergency. The chaotic rush to the hospital was a terrifying blur of blaring sirens, panicked shouts, and the suffocating, sterile scent of antiseptic. Within the cold and forgiving walls of the emergency room, the true gravity of Nikki's condition became horrifyingly clear. Her children were thrust into a state of paralyzing fear, watching their fiercely resilient mother reduced to a vulnerable patient tethered to life-saving monitors, hovering dangerously on the precipice between life and death. In the midst of this terrifying medical crisis, a figure emerged from the shadows of his own profound, agonizing grief to offer a steady and wavering hand. Jack Abbott, a man currently drowning in the agonizing mystery of his own wife's disappearance, received the devastating news about Nikki and immediately dropped everything. Despite the suffocating weight of Diane's presumed kidnapping and the frantic, hair-stained searches that have consumed his recent days, Jack's historical and unbreakable bond with Nikki pulled him directly to her side. He did not hesitate, nor did he consider the bitter ultimatums previously hurled at him by Victor. Jack's response was an act of pure, unadulterated devotion, a testament to a connection that has weathered decades of marriages, betrayals, and bitter family feuds. The scene within the intensive care unit was one of profound, quiet intimacy and heart-wrenching vulnerability. Jack Abbott, looking weary and emotionally battered by his own life's relentless tragedies, sat steadfastly by Nikki's bedside. He became an immediate, unshakable pillar of strength, not just for the ailing matriarch, but for her terrified children who were desperately seeking an anchor in the storm. Jack held Nikki's fragile hand, his steady presence offering a silent, soothing reassurance that she was not fighting this terrifying neurological battle alone. He provided the emotional sanctuary that she had been so desperately craving, stepping seamlessly into the role of protector and confidant during the absolute weakest and most terrifying moment of her entire life. There is something incredibly profoundly heartbreaking about watching Jack and Nikki find their way back to each other in the darkest of corridors. As an observer of their decades-long dance, I cannot help but feel a deep, aching melancholy for the tragic timing that has always cursed their connection. It stirs a genuine, visceral sorrow within me to see how much they truly understand one another, functioning as twin souls who are perpetually kept apart by circumstance, pride, and obligation. Their bond is a beautiful, tragic tapestry woven with endless what-ifs and painful missed opportunities. Seeing Jack sitting there, setting aside his own monumental agony over dying just to hold Nikki's hand, evokes a profound sense of warmth mixed with devastating sadness. It is a raw, beautiful testament to the endurance of true affection, a love that survives the harshest winters of Genoa City. And it genuinely breaks my heart to know that this pure moment of solace is destined to be shattered by the toxic pride of the men surrounding them. The shattering of that fragile medical solace was inevitable, heralded by the delayed, thunderous arrival of Victor Newman. Pulled away from his corporate scheming and aggressive legal maneuvering by the agonizing news of his wife's emergency hospitalization, Victor rushed to the medical center with a heart full of suffocating dread. The sudden influx of fear was a harsh, violently sobering wake-up call, ripping him from the intoxicating heights of his war against Phyllis and plunging him into the terrifying reality of his own negligence. The corridors of the hospital felt endlessly long as Victor navigated the clinical maze, his mind racing with a desperate need to fix a situation that could not be solved with a hostile takeover or a fabricated email. He arrived expecting to be the savior, the commanding presence that would banish the fear from his family's eyes. Instead, Victor was greeted by a visual that struck him with the devastating force of a physical blow. Standing in the doorway of the recovery room, Victor's eyes locked onto the agonizing tableau of Jack Abbott intimately comforting his wife. The sight of his ultimate, lifelong rival occupying the exact physical and emotional space that rightfully belonged to him ignited an immediate, explosive surge of visceral jealousy. The tender way Jack spoke to Nikki, the gentle grip of their hands, and the palpable sense of relief emanating from the room at Jack's presence were all sharp daggers to Victor's monumental pride. In that singular, freezing moment, Victor was forced to confront the devastating reality that he had been entirely absent when the woman he loved needed him the most. The internal conflict raging within the Newman patriarch was a terrifying, volatile storm of toxic emotions. Beneath the immediate, blinding rage was a deep, suffocating well of profound guilt. Victor knew, in the darkest, most guarded corners of his conscience, that his misplaced priorities were the sole reason he was standing on the outside looking in. He had actively chosen the thrill of destroying Phyllis Summers over the quiet, necessary vigilance of caring for his ailing wife. Yet, Victor Newman is a man constitutionally incapable of processing guilt without transmuting it into aggressive warfare. Rather than turning his regret inward and acknowledging his monumental failure as a husband, Victor projected his self-loathing outward, directing the full, terrifying force of his fury squarely at Jack Abbott. The silent confrontation that ensued within the sterile confines of the hospital room was thick with a suffocating, unbearable tension. The air crackled with unspoken history of betrayal, stolen loves, and decades of corporate and personal warfare. Victor and Jack locked eyes over Nikki's fragile, resting form, their mutual hatred vibrating at a frequency that threatened to shatter the very glass of the medical monitoring equipment. Jack's gaze was steady, defiant, and laced with a quiet, undeniable condemnation of Victor's absence. Victor's eyes were practically glowing with a lethal, possessive rage, silently promising absolute destruction for the man who dared to step into his territory and highlight his catastrophic failures. This highly charged encounter at the hospital is not merely a fleeting moment of jealousy. It is the ultimate catalyst for a catastrophic escalation in the legendary feud between the Newman and Abbott dynasties. The emotional lines have been redrawn with permanent, unforgiving marker. Victor's jealousy is not a passive emotion, it is a weaponized force of nature that will dictate his every move going forward. His terrifying realization that Jack can provide a profound emotional safety for Nikki that Victor currently cannot will drive the Newman patriarch to dangerous, unpredictable extremes. He will view Jack not just as a former lover of his wife, but as an active, existential threat to the very fabric of his marriage and his family's unity. Caught squarely in the crossfire of this escalating masculine warfare is Nikki, a woman whose failing health requires absolute peace and neurological stability. She is trapped in an agonizing emotional purgatory, suspended between the man she married, a man whose love is fierce but inherently destructive, and the man who has always served as her quiet, unwavering sanctuary. The stress of managing the explosive dynamic between Victor and Jack is a toxic burden that her severely compromised nervous system simply cannot handle. Every shouted threat, every glare of hatred exchanged over her hospital bed, actively hinders her ability to fight the terrifying medical crisis ravaging her brain. The aftermath of this hospital confrontation will ripple through every corner of Genoa City, leaving a trail of emotional destruction in its wake. Victor will undoubtedly launch a desperate, aggressive campaign to reassert his absolute dominance over his family, attempting to overcompensate for his previous absence with suffocating, dictatorial control. He will seek to banish Jack from Nikki's orbit using any means necessary, viewing every interaction between them as a personal, unforgivable insult. Jack, however, fueled by his own grief and a genuine, fiercely protective love for Nikki, will steadfastly refuse to back down or be intimidated. He will not abandon a woman he cares for simply to appease the fragile, bruised ego of a tyrant. As the medical monitors beep and the sterile hospital lights hum, the stage is set for a brutal battle of wills that could leave both legacy families in absolute ruins. Nikki's life hangs precariously in the balance, a fragile flame flickering in the violent winds of a bitter, decades-old rivalry that refuses to die. Will Victor's all-consuming jealousy and desperate need for control ultimately destroy his last, fleeting chance to save his beloved wife? Or will Jack's unwavering devotion and quiet strength push the Newman patriarch completely over the edge into irreversible madness?